Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's career conversation, a virtual career and professional development series designed to highlight the experiences, achievements, and insights for our forever Duke alumni. Launched by Duke New York Board in 2020 and later expanded to Duke DC, this program helps support our Duke Alumni Plus community looking for professional growth and inspiration. My name is Leighanne. I studied biomedical engineering, class of 2015, and my master's in 2017. And I'm really thrilled to introduce today's featured guest, Garheng, who is a triple Duke, getting his Ph.D., M.D., and M.B.A. from Duke. Garheng is also the founder and managing partner at HealthQuest Capital, a life science investment firm. Before we start our interview, a few housekeeping tips. We ask everyone to stay on mute, but during the Q&A towards the end, if you want to turn your camera on, we'd love to see all Duke faces. Also, we received a lot of audience questions, so I've tried to incorporate as much as possible. However, please feel free to use the chat to share comments and ask additional questions. So let's get started. So Garheng, I think everyone has read your bio, and to be brief, you're a physician scientist, engineer by training. You're currently an investor across all areas of healthcare, and you're an incredibly successful GP with over 35 companies that have gone public or exited. Most recently, you were elected as the Duke Board of Trustees. So beyond what's on your LinkedIn and a typical bio, how else would you introduce yourself, and what am I missing?
Well, it's very kind. Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure to spend time with the Duke family. A couple of fun facts outside of the professional, milestones. I played a lot of volleyball growing up, including at Stanford, and I say professionally, marginally, since I probably would have starved, but I did get paid to play. And then maybe another thing is I have three kids who all have the same birthday. So it's a
Wow.
big day to remember. But anyways, but professionally, I spent almost all my career in healthcare and innovation.
So I want to try and be linear about your journey in the short time we have today. So to start with your Duke journey, you earned an MD, PhD, MBA on a very compressed timeline. So what motivated pursuing all three, and how did all that training shape your investment lens?
Mm. So maybe take one step back. So it turns out everybody in my family is a physician. I'm actually the only not like real doctor in the sense that I don't practice medicine. And so in some sense, it was a rite of passage to get your medical degree. Then you can flip hamburgers, pump gas, do whatever you want after. In my case, I really enjoyed being a physician and seeing patients. But what really drove me was the opportunity to have some scale and impact. And so, my father's a cardiologist, my wife's a cardiologist. And if you see, patients, it's a one-on-one activity. And it's a really special professional relationship between a physician and a patient. But I was hoping to have the opportunity to reach more people at scale. So in addition to doing the MD, I thought, well, if I invent a new drug or device, diagnostic, I might have the opportunity to reach more people. So that's actually how I ended up getting a PhD in biomedical engineering at Duke. And we actually worked on some things that actually worked in terms of drug delivery. And I got some exposure then to patenting and licensing. And then I realized, nothing goes from the bench to the bedside unless it gets commercialized. So that's actually how I ended up going to business school as well. So it was a sort of gradual progression, but I've been fortunate now that, we're on the investing side because you have the opportunity to impact a lot of patients, although you don't know their names.
Well, we have to ask, like you spent a lot of time in school. Which degree do you feel like you didn't have to do? And maybe, can I ask that?
Well, so, I did 2 degrees at Stanford, actually did a few degrees at Duke. And what I would say is that the one degree I don't have that I wish I had is actually a psychology degree, because it turns out most of what we do in investing is about people and understanding founders and entrepreneurs and partners. And so, um, that's probably one degree I wish I did have. The rest
It's
of
never
it,
too late. It's never too
yeah,
late.
there's some continue educated, but look, every degree contributes in its own ways. But to be fair, at this point, it's much more about the experience than the degrees per se. I do feel like it is easier or more reasonable to go back and get an MBA later in life. It's not that reasonable to go back and get a MD later in life. And so people do it, but it's a lot harder. Um, so from that perspective, I probably would sort of sequence them in a certain way.
This is a careers conversation, and I believe, and even myself, we're really interested in hearing your genesis story as an investor. So, what was there a moment that nudged you from being the clinical scientific training kind of towards entrepreneurship and investing?
Yeah, I think for me, again, it was whether or not we could have the opportunity to have scale and impact. And so, if you're a physician scientist and you're doing academic medicine, then it's much harder to have that sort of scale and impact. I think that when you think about uh, starting your own company or having control over that, you can individually drive the ship much more. And the reason I ended up as an investor was not because I grew up thinking I would be an investor. I had started as the founder and CEO of a company. It worked out. I started a second one. It worked out. And then I thought, well, I need to do like 50 of these. And the only way to do 50 of them is that you're an investor. And so it was really a gradual progression from physician, scientist, business, then entrepreneur, and then investor. And I did a couple stints, at McKinsey and Glaxo along the way to get a little more business exposure. But I know I'm a little biased. It is one of the best jobs if you happen to like learning all the time.
I'm glad you brought up this operator experience that you have, but before we do that, just touching on this investor role, and by the way, you've been incredibly successful, and many of us want to know here. Could you share a little bit about your secret sauce to that? I mean, what makes you you at the end of the day, and why do you think you're so good at it?
Well, you're very kind. I think it takes a village, to be fair, to be successful. I think at some point, it goes beyond what you can do individually, but what other people can do and help you as you're trying to achieve your goals.
Hmm.
But I would say one benefit that I had was maybe the opportunity to bridge disparate historical functional areas. And even biomedical engineering, when I was an undergrad, that degree didn't exist, right? I was a chemical engineer and a biologist because Stanford didn't even have biomedical engineering. Uh, and so being able to have the engineering component applied to biology, but also be able to speak biology to engineers, I think is helpful. And similarly, bridging, clinical medicine and research. And so you actually don't have to be the world's best physician or the world's best scientist if you can help communicate between those. And then the same thing, I think, goes to the next stage, which is between science and business as well. So maybe one thing that I did or do well is translate between the different historical, I would say, specialties, because most of the innovation, I think, requires making connections that maybe are not as obvious, and so that's been helpful.
Thank you. And going back to the comment you made about being an operator, you've actually, and I think read in your bio, you've stepped into the CEO role twice.
Yeah.
What do you respect most about operators, and that has been shaped by your own personal experience? And what makes you the savvy investor today when evaluating or supporting companies based on this experience you've had?
One of the things I would say about being in a company is that you realize it's messy, right? It's like real life where you have to operate. And sometimes I think investors think of it more from a spreadsheet or a chessboard where like I move this piece, I move that piece. But in real life, it's not that clean. And so I think that having spent time inside a company, you realize what's actually practical and doable. And so then when you become an investor and you sit on the board, you're actually much more empathetic and I would say realistic about what is achievable. And then the other part is this human component. Again, it's hard to see it on a business plan or a spreadsheet, but this uh, energy that companies have when they're all pulling the same direction is tangible. And so some companies have momentum and sort of recognizing that I think is important. I know, like you can have really amazing coaches who are never players, but frequently those who also played before they coached, have a unique advantage. And so I
Mhm.
do think it can be helpful to have done that.
Having seen so many invest operators and having been an invest operator yourself, like, do you have any pet peeves of an operator?
I mean, look, most entrepreneurs are really, really uh, optimistic. And because if you weren't, you like probably would never
You
start a
have
company.
to.
Yeah, exactly. You have to.
Mhm.
Uh, but the flip side of that, of course, is that optimism can sometimes translate into not realistic timelines, not realistic budgets. And I do think that a lot of entrepreneurs have that happen to
Mhm.
them, and it's challenging because it's a balance of really believing in what you're doing and what could be possible versus the realities. So I think that's a pretty common trap that people fall in. And the other part, of course, is that a lot of people are very, very smart, that start these companies, especially sometimes they're very strong scientists or engineers. Um, but the truth is nobody knows everything. And I do think a lot of them feel like they know everything. And I always joke about this with physicians since I happen to be one. The physicians who start the companies always say, well, I should be the CEO because, I'm smart. And I always tell them there's some other person that spent 20 years in business. They're better at it than you. I mean, it would be crazy for some MBA to come to you and say, well, why don't I just operate on a patient? But I think a lot of times, uh, you know, especially really smart founders have a tough time sort of taking advice.
On that note, maybe we can transition on the fact that you are also a founder of your own firm.
Hmm.
So maybe looking back over HealthQuest like evolution, what was a decision that felt uncomfortable or non-obvious at the time, but in hindsight ended up shaping the firm's identity the most today?
Oh, great question. I would say there are a couple things that we did that were different, maybe than common investing at the time. So in healthcare in particular, a lot of healthcare is siloed. So there's drugs and devices and diagnostics and healthcare IT and services. And a lot of investors identify themselves as such. You're a biotech investor, you're a healthcare services investor. One of the things that we tried to do at HealthQuest was to say the healthcare ecosystem in real life is not like that. Like no doctor says, I'm a drug doctor, a device doctor, a diagnostic doctor. They say, I'm an oncologist, I treat cancer patients, and sometimes I use this or that. And so one of the things that we took to heart was to try and invest holistically in
Mhm.
healthcare as opposed to certain subsectors. And so that has shaped the way we think about investing. And to be fair, the type of people that we recruit to our team. Because if you tell somebody you have to slash have the opportunity to invest across everything, they need to be really comfortable coming across different sectors and recognizing that they may not be expert in everything. So that's actually shaped the fact that we recruit usually the best athletes, as opposed to somebody who's only very deep in a single sector.
Mhm.
And so that's actually paid dividends because the world changes and the ability to adapt and learn new information probably actually more important than being a subject area expert, at least in what we do. Um, so a few thoughts there.
Then maybe if you were starting HealthQuest today, is there anything you would intentionally do differently?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a brutal comment, but I'll share it since I would be more Darwinian about how I built the team. When we first started, I used to always say that this is sort of like the HealthQuest family. But in some sense, you don't get to choose your family. You're born into your family. But that's actually not the right way to go about building a team. You have to find the very best people position by position. And so to be fair, I probably would have been a little bit more efficient, if you will, with
Mhm.
both adding and subtracting from the team. And when you don't do that, it costs you not just in terms of how well your team performs, But having a player that's not an A player is actually kind of demotivating to the other A players. So that's probably something that I would do differently.
We're almost at the halfway mark now, and I would love to encourage everyone to ask the questions that you wanted or we haven't brought up by using the chat. I'll try to stay in touch and see what I can incorporate. But we did get so many questions, and so I want to be able to read a couple of them out here. Actually, a lot of the alumni who have joined our call today are really looking for advice. So I've kind of grouped them into like three different buckets. So the first bucket is really for our clinicians or researchers who aspire to build or join an investment platform. What practical first steps should they take from your opinion?
So it's interesting. When I was in academics, like if you send somebody an email, you mostly expect them to respond. But like in business, that's actually just not the case. Like you could send out 100 emails, people might not respond. And so I think it requires a little bit of thicker skin and a lot of networking because you never know where that break is going to come from. And no different than practicing and studying or seeing patients, you have to work pretty hard at networking. And so I would encourage clinicians or scientists who are thinking about getting into business or certainly investing, to treat that like a concerted effort. And look, the truth is, you'll probably get recruited for your technical or clinical background. But from the other side of the fence, all the physicians and PhDs look very similar. And so you have to differentiate yourself either by virtue of having the relationship or showing some entrepreneurial zeal. So I would encourage that. The other part, besides getting into investing, is maybe it's a stair step. And so a lot of people will work at a company that's related to their specialty and then slowly transition into business and then ultimately into investing. So it may be a two-step process that you might consider.
We've got a lot of questions from our healthcare operators. And the main questions are really around funding environment, as you could have guessed. So what guidance would you give founders about where to focus, what to avoid over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, look, fundraising is never easy. And I would say in this environment, probably not any easier. The focus now is very much on self-sufficiency. So it's all about capital efficiency. I mean, outside of maybe AI, every other business has to show a pretty clean path to self-sufficiency. And so, as you build your plans and think through that, I would encourage to sort of focus on that versus just growth. The other part is being really creative. What we have realized is that the partners of today are very different than the partners before. So if you were doing something before, it's the pharmaceutical companies, the medical device companies, maybe the hospital systems, the insurance companies, but now Amazon, Meta, Best Buy, I mean, there's a lot of players who are in healthcare now that you might not have thought of before. And so I do think that, pockets of money have become available that, were not as obvious as before.
Last words of advice, but this is for mostly those with a business background and considering a transition to healthcare investing. What skills or personal traits matters most early in your career, or do you believe?
Yeah. So one of the things about investing is the ability to deal with ambiguity, if you will. And so I do think that, we live in a world where we ultimately make a binary decision, which is did we invest or not invest? But we take in hundreds of data points. And I think that the ability to deal with ambiguity is a really important component. And if you come from a large company, especially where you feel like you have data and you can make these projections, a lot of times on the investing side, the data is much less perfect. And so the ability to be comfortable with that. And then look, the other part, again, is getting exposure. So if you want to be an investor, going to a company that has investors is always a good place to start. So a lot of friends who say, I want to get into venture capital, but there's not an immediate path. They go to the management team of a venture-backed company, and then you get exposure that way as well.
Maybe taking a step back thematically in healthcare, I've read and kind of listened to a lot of interviews you've been doing recently, and it seems like you get a lot of questions about AI, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier too. So
Yeah.
maybe where do you see AI driving tangible near-term value across healthcare, and kind of what remains overhyped?
So, I mean, look, AI is real. It's here to stay. We some amazing applications in clinical medicine where it makes physicians much more efficient in terms of ambient scribing, reading chest X-rays, reading pathology slides. So that is definitely here to stay. I think AI and other applications around supply chain and even logistics, I think, are going to be great. I will say that there is a lot of hype and excitement around AI drug discovery. And I think that's actually much more challenging. And it's not because AI could not work there. It's because we don't have enough data. We just actually don't know all the parameters of how the biology responds. And so I think that AI drug discovery, I don't want to say overhyped. I would just say that the enthusiasm is not yet been proven out. But in other areas of healthcare, I would say AI is already here.
When do you feel like you recognize that? And do you think you're on the earlier curve or kind of in the curve where everyone else recognized it as well?
Well, I would say that we have some colleagues at our firm that are very, very early adopters. And so they really helped our team, I would say, see that. I mean, one
Mhm.
scary thing about investing is, I mean, we take all these disparate data points and make a decision. I mean, AI should be amazing at that. So if the data is actually available, um, AI should be coming for our jobs too, as well. So, I'm holding out hope that on the private side, at least, relationships and all that matters. But,
Mhm.
uh, like anything else, it's going to change the way we do things.
I got a question that I thought was kind of that's I think is entertaining to think about, but what would you tell a current medical student is the best way to prepare for and integrate AI into the medical field?
Yeah, I heard this really great comment from a hospital system CEO, and he said, AI is not going to replace physicians, uh, but physicians who use AI will replace physicians who don't. And so I do think that the ability to lean into all these technologies and use them will be an important survival skill,
Mhm.
if you will. And look, as with any other field, AI is going to change the way we operate, and I think we just have to embrace it. Because if we don't, that's when you get in trouble.
In terms of the space, like what is most exciting to you these days, or where do you find yourself kind of spending time in as an investor?
Look, I mean, it's an exciting time because the innovation in almost every category is unbelievable, right? So I mean, you do this for your day job too. On the therapeutic side, there's all sorts of new biology and gene editing and things that people get excited about. On the diagnostic side, our ability to do sequencing in a very rapid, cost-effective way, liquid biopsy. I mean, now you can actually do that as a screening tool. I would say that on care delivery, we are involved with a bunch of virtual nursing, virtual ambient scribing, all that is going to change the way we think about healthcare. And then, the part that we have not figured out, but I think once we
Mhm.
do, is actually how we pay for all this. And I don't mean it costs too much. I mean in a reimbursement situation because healthcare is built on somebody doing something and then getting paid for it, right? You see a patient, you read a film, whatever it is, that's how you get paid. But how do you get paid when the software just reads the chest X-ray in 1 nanosecond? Like, how does that reimbursement work? And so, until we figure that out, I actually think the rate limiter is probably not the technology; it's actually the reimbursement of that technology. And so, we're spending a lot of time thinking about those models as well.
On that note, I think you have young kids.
Yes.
Imagine if all of them were like, I want to be just like you. I want to get my MD, PhD, MBA at Duke, and I want to be a healthcare investor. where would you guide them, or what would you guide them in terms of experiences that they should gain in their lifetime?
Well, it's funny. So my wife and I are both physicians, and we love medicine. Uh, I don't know that we would impose the you have to be a doctor before you could do anything else, because there's so many other amazing things uh, to consider. But again, I still think that the key in most things is to make these disparate connections from various fields and interests. And so, again, I mean, if you're going to be a healthcare investor, your ability to see broadly, I think will be
Mhm.
important and to be well-rounded. I think the days of I'm a content expert or I can memorize better than anybody else, like that's totally over. So, I spent all this time memorizing gross anatomy, but that's like not important now.
Um, Maybe to kind of come to the end of our interview,
Yeah,
obviously this wouldn't be a Duke interview without asking you about kind of your Duke involvement and things you're part of and your experience over time. So you
yeah,
recently joined Duke's Board of Trustees, which I think is
sure.
an absolutely amazing accomplishment. What does this role mean to you, and what are you excited about as a trustee to accomplish?
Well, I will say, I mean, Duke is an amazing place. It's this, very well-rounded university with great academics, great athletics, great social ecosystem. And I think that the ability to have such a rich experience is sort of unmatched, if you will. Excuse me. But one of the things that the board of trustees we're all thinking about is the evolution of academics, right? That what's the role of higher education in this country and globally when how people learn is different now than it was 20 years ago. The kinds of students, kinds of degrees that are important are different now. And so, the board and obviously the president and the administration are thinking through uh, how we can educate the best and the brightest. And so that I think will be, a challenge because the foundational skills now that are important are different than what they were before. And then the other part, of course, is that as education is becoming more and more global, both in terms of where students go and where we attract students from. And so we need to think through that. So I think that's an important part. And then the other is this interface with industry. And I think understanding how to translate a lot of the academic work into practical solutions and, our ability to uh, both train students, but also as a university, be part of the industry, if you will.
Um, and this wouldn't be a Duke event if we didn't kind of end the note towards the end of our interview by asking you, like, can you share with us your best Duke memory?
Well, that's both easy and obvious in some sense. So I met my wife at Duke, and then we got married at the Duke Chapel. And in true Duke
Wow.
tradition, we camped out to get our slot at the Duke Chapel. So I have this picture of my wife and I in a tent on the front steps of the Duke Chapel, because for those of you know, you have to actually camp out a year before the day that you want it. So it was great, and we loved our experience at Duke.
That's amazing. And maybe to end the note on your professional journey and something that I'm curious about as well. What do people, and here I mean like the average professional, investor, GP, operator, what do they misinterpret or miss or don't know about you that you wish more people knew?
Um, well, look, I mean, we're all humans, and I would say that sometimes you read these resumes and you assume a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, I have three kids. You know, I I like to spend time with my friends, and so if you recognize that, we can be a lot more approachable. Hopefully, we're approachable anyways. And look, I certainly all the Duke alum. It's part of a big extended family, and so welcome the opportunity to meet more of them.
Well, thank you so much, Garheng, for your time. By the way, I feel like people are really intrigued by your clock. It's
Oh,
been a running through a conversation on
it,
the side.
it's
Um,
true. I happen to collect watches and clocks, so it's a fun hobby.
Yeah, and then thank you everyone for attending today's New Career conversation. one thing I want to highlight is please save the date for our next conversation, which is on Wednesday, March 18th at 5 p.m. with Sanford's Distinguished Fellow, Danny Werfel, who was the former commissioner of the IRS. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.